In front of 300 stunned guests, a glass of red wine splashed across the bride-to-be's white dress. The mother-in-law's venomous words echoed in the hall. "Get this dirty beggar out of my wedding." But what happened next? It was far worse than anyone imagined. What truth would turn everything upside down? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Meet Gina, a quiet, reserved woman, barely in her 20s, carrying a secret deep within her. She's pregnant, but no one knows. Her calm exterior hides a world of emotions, a world of fear, and a world of unanswered questions. Gina never expected her life to lead her here, to this moment, at a wedding that wasn't hers. But destiny, or something far more painful, brought her to this point. She's about to face the mother-in-law from hell, and nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold. Then there's Rodina, the picture-perfect mother-in-law, the one who's always been in control, a woman who's used to having everything go her way. Rodina isn't just a mother, she's a force, and she's had her son, JK, wrapped around her finger since birth. But now, on the day of JK's wedding, Gina's unexpected presence is about to shatter that control. JK, the groom, was her only child, and Rodina had long decided who he would marry. Sarah was perfect in her eyes, beautiful, wealthy, and polished. The ideal match, or so she thought. She couldn't imagine anything or anyone standing in the way of her carefully laid plans. But Gina's arrival, this woman, whom no one expected, was about to change everything. But there's more. Something darker at play. Something no one knew about, not even JK. Secrets that had been buried, waiting to resurface. Gina's presence at the wedding wasn't a coincidence. She wasn't just an uninvited guest. No, she was someone with a story, and that story had the power to break everything apart. The tension had been building for months. Gina knew the day would come, but she never imagined it would be like this. She could already feel the eyes on her, the whispers behind her back. What was she doing here? What right did she have to be here? And then there was Rodina's gaze, sharp, cutting, filled with disdain. Gina wasn't prepared for this. She wasn't prepared for what would happen when the truth finally came out. This was supposed to be the happiest day of JK's life, his wedding day, a celebration of love, family, and new beginnings. But that day, no. That day was about to turn into a nightmare, where lies would be uncovered, and everything they thought they knew would be shattered. And as the tension rose, one question lingered in the air. Could anyone really escape their past? Rodina thought she had everything in control, but when the truth began to surface, it would become clear that this wedding wasn't just about Gina and JK. It was about a mother's control, a son's loyalty, and the secrets of a family that no one could have ever guessed. No one knew how deep the lies went, and no one was ready for the truth to come crashing down on them. It started with a simple greeting, the kind you expect at any wedding. Gina walked into the grand hall, taking in the ornate decor, the soft hum of laughter and conversation, the clink of glasses. It all seemed so ordinary, but within seconds, that ordinary moment shattered. In the distance, she saw him, JK, standing there, a nervous smile on his face, looking almost too perfect for this moment. But then, it happened. Rodina, his mother, saw Gina. Her eyes locked onto her, and for a split second, it felt like time slowed down. Gina was nothing but an intruder in this carefully crafted world. But the worst part? Gina was about to find out just how little control she had over this moment. As the ceremony continued, the first words from Rodina's lips pierced through the air like a knife. "What is she doing here?" Her voice rang out across the hall, catching everyone's attention. Gina's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the weight of the room shift, the whispers starting like a ripple in a pond. Rodina's eyes were cold, her words filled with venom. "Get this dirty beggar out of my wedding," she screamed, her voice echoing through the hall. Gina froze, every nerve in her body screaming to run, to disappear, but she couldn't. She was stuck, and as the room fell silent, all eyes turned to her, the woman who was ruining everything. Her pulse raced as the words "dirty beggar" burned into her skin. Gina could feel the heat in her cheeks, the sting of humiliation. "Why am I here?" she thought, her mind racing. "I'm not supposed to be here. Why did I even come?" The whispers around her grew louder. "She doesn't belong here," one voice hissed. "She must be here to ruin things," another added. She could feel their eyes on her, judging her. "I can't back down. I can't run," she told herself. But how could she stand up to this woman who controlled everything, who had planned this wedding down to the last detail, and now she was calling Gina pathetic? The room held its breath as Rodina turned to JK, her face twisted with disgust. "You're embarrassing me. This woman, she's nothing," she spat. JK's face paled, but he didn't speak. And that silence made it worse. It made Gina feel like she was invisible, like she didn't even matter. It was as if the entire room had turned against her. But what they didn't know was the truth she was hiding. And maybe this was the moment she needed to find her voice. But then something unexpected happened. The whispers grew louder, and the silence stretched on. The weight of it all was too much. And then, in the middle of the chaos, Gina placed a hand on her stomach. Her hand trembled as she felt the tiny life growing inside her. The truth was out now. The whispers became louder, more accusatory. Is she pregnant? Is she the reason he's here? The moment the word pregnant escaped the lips of a guest, the room seemed to gasp. Pregnant? That one word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Gina could feel the eyes on her, now mixed with pity and judgment. She had hoped to keep it a secret for just a little longer, but now everyone knew. The gossip started, and the room buzzed with speculation. Was she trying to steal JK away from Sarah? Was this her plan all along? The questions came fast and furious, but no one was asking Gina for answers. Rodina's eyes narrowed. "What is this? A scheme to ruin my son's life?" she hissed, her voice dripping with disdain. She stepped toward Gina, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You think you can just walk in here and steal my son from the woman he loves? How pathetic," Rodina spat. But the truth was, Rodina had been manipulating everything for months. She had made sure that everything, from the wedding venue to the smallest details, fit her perfect image. She couldn't stand the thought of anyone disrupting that, especially not this village girl who had no place in her world. Yet, there was something Gina wasn't willing to let go of anymore. As Rodina raged, Gina's eyes locked onto her, and for the first time in the entire ceremony, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but filled with a strength no one had seen before. "I'm not here to ruin your life," Gina said, her words cutting through the tension. "I'm here because I'm carrying your grandchild." The words hung in the air like a bomb. For a moment no one moved, no one spoke. And then, as if on cue, Gina reached into her bag and pulled out the marriage certificate. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at her, but no one knew what to say. The truth had come out in the most unexpected way. Rodina's face went pale. She looked at the marriage certificate and then at her son, who stood there speechless. But in that moment, Gina realized that the truth wasn't just going to shatter the wedding, it was going to break everything they thought they knew about their family. The whispers around her grew louder. "Did you know?" someone asked JK. "Did you know she was married to her?" And as the judgment spread, Gina stood tall, the weight of the truth lifting a little from her shoulders. But in the back of her mind, she knew that this was just the beginning of a far more complicated story than anyone could have predicted. But why had Gina come? Was it really to steal JK back from Sarah? Or was there something more dangerous, something that no one, not even Gina herself, could have foreseen? And why had Rodina, the woman who seemed to have everything, allowed this disaster to unfold? But then everything changed. Gina stood there, the room heavy with the weight of 1,000 gazes. Her heart pounded in her chest as the words she had kept hidden for so long slipped from her lips. "I'm married to JK," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but carrying across the silent hall. The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The room was frozen in disbelief. Gina's hand trembled as she raised the marriage certificate high above her head. The crowd looked on in shock as the reality of her words sank in. Sarah's face went white, her lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came out. Her hands shook, and she stumbled back a few steps. She had been the center of attention, the perfect bride in the perfect dress, and now she was staring at the one thing she never thought she would see, proof that JK had married another woman, a woman who had somehow slipped under her radar, a woman who was carrying his child. The room seemed to hold its breath, unsure how to react. But it wasn't just Sarah's world that was crashing down. As the truth rippled through the crowd, all eyes turned to JK. His silence in that moment said everything. He didn't try to deny it. He didn't try to explain. His eyes, locked onto the ground, spoke louder than any words could. His lips trembled, but he said nothing. Gina was the woman he had married, and the reality of it hit everyone like a wave. The perfect wedding, the one that had been so carefully planned, was now an explosive disaster. But that moment, that was just the beginning. The tension was unbearable. The guests didn't know what to think. Was this some sort of prank? A joke gone wrong? But there was no mistaking the look in Gina's eyes. She wasn't lying. This was real. The truth, once buried, was now laid bare for everyone to see. The wedding they had all come to celebrate had been overshadowed by the one truth they hadn't expected. JK was already married, and his new bride wasn't the one standing at the altar. And just like that, everything they thought they knew about JK's life, about this perfect wedding, this perfect couple, crumbled in an instant. It wasn't the wedding anyone had imagined. It was a nightmare no one could have predicted. But what was the real story? What had happened between Gina and JK? Why had he kept this hidden for so long? The questions began to swirl, and soon they would lead to even darker revelations. If this part is making sense, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's really watching to this point. What they didn't know was who was watching them. In the chaos that followed Gina's revelation, no one noticed the man standing quietly in the back of the room. David, JK's best friend. He had been in the shadows, observing it all, but now he knew something the others didn't. He had seen the cracks in Rodina's facade long before today. He had been privy to things that made him uneasy, things he couldn't ignore anymore. As the tension escalated and guests murmured in disbelief, David stepped forward. JK, unable to hide the confusion and frustration any longer, finally turned to face his mother. "What is going on, Mom?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me about this? About her? About the marriage?" His words hung in the air like accusations, each one more painful than the last. And for the first time, Rodina faltered. She had always been in control, always. But now, her carefully constructed world was falling apart. Rodina's face turned crimson with rage as she tried to maintain her composure. "This is a disgrace," she hissed, glaring at Gina. "You think you can just walk into our lives and tear everything apart? This woman, she's nothing. She's a threat to everything we've worked for." But then, the truth started to spill out. Slowly, like a trickle at first, then flooding into the room. David, who had been watching all of this unfold, couldn't stay silent any longer. He stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "Rodina, you think you're the only one with secrets," he said, his voice calm but full of conviction. As he held up the phone, a hush fell over the room. The recording that played was chilling. Rodina's voice, unmistakable, offered Gina money to disappear. "Take this money," she said in the recording, "and leave. Leave and never come back. My son has a future with Sarah, and you're just a complication. No one will even remember you." The words were cold, calculating, and manipulative, but what really took everyone by surprise was the desperation in her voice, the fear of losing control. The room erupted. People were shocked, but no one was more stunned than Sarah. The perfect match she had thought she was meant to be was now nothing more than a puppet in her mother's game. Was Rodina really just trying to protect her son? Or was there more to the story? Was this about love? Or was it about power, control, and manipulation? As the recording continued to play, everyone's eyes turned to Gina. But what was the real story? What was Gina hiding? And why had she come to this wedding? Was she trying to tear apart a family? Or was there more to this story than anyone had ever imagined? The stakes had never been higher. The fallout had only just begun. JK, who had been silent for so long, now found himself in the middle of a war he never asked for. The conflict between his mother and his wife had reached a boiling point, and now the world around him was crumbling. His silence spoke volumes, but the questions remained. Could Gina and JK ever find peace? Or was this the beginning of something far darker? But what happens when Gina finally confronts the truth about her mother-in-law? Could this be the moment everything falls apart for good? And then it all came crashing down. The tension had reached its peak, and JK knew there was only one thing left to do. With every step, the weight of the moment pressed heavier on him. The time for silence was over. He couldn't hide from the truth anymore. He couldn't hide from what had been laid out in front of him. He had to confront his mother. He had to confront Rodina, and as he walked toward her, the room fell still, waiting for the confrontation that was long overdue. Rodina stood in the corner of the room, arms crossed, defiant as ever. But even she knew this was no ordinary conversation. JK's eyes locked with hers, and in that moment, it felt like the room had shrunk to just the two of them. The noise of the crowd faded away. His voice, trembling but determined, broke the silence. "Why, Mom? Why did you do this?" JK's voice cracked, the words heavy with pain. "Why did you try to destroy our lives?" Rodina, always the picture of control, seemed momentarily taken aback, but it was only for a second. Her walls, her facade, were crumbling now. She looked at her son, tears threatening to spill from her eyes, but there was no denying it anymore. She had gone too far. "You don't understand," Rodina whispered, almost pleading, but her voice was trembling. "I was protecting you. You don't get it. She was never meant to be a part of your life. She's a distraction, a mistake." But there was more. There was always more. And now, she could no longer hide the truth. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she began to speak. "I offered her money to leave. I thought that if she disappeared, everything would go back to normal. You would marry Sarah. Your future would be secure." But the truth was darker than even JK had imagined. With a cold, empty look in her eyes, Rodina whispered the unthinkable. "And I told her to get rid of the baby. I thought it was the only way to save you, to protect you from the mess she created." The room was silent again. The confession hung in the air like a toxic fog. JK staggered back, his hands trembling. "You threatened my child?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. His face twisted with disgust, the love he once had for his mother shattering like glass at his feet. The woman who had always claimed to love him, to protect him, had been the very one trying to tear apart his world. But it was more than just betrayal. It was murder in cold blood. The woman who was supposed to care for him had made him a puppet in her cruel, controlling game. Rodina's shoulders slumped as she admitted the full extent of her manipulation, her desperation laid bare. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, the last remnants of her pride slipping away. But it was too late. The truth had come out, and the damage could never be undone. The police arrived soon after. Rodina was arrested, her calm exterior now replaced with the panic of a woman caught in her own lies. Gina and JK stood side by side, their bond stronger than ever as they watched her be led away in handcuffs. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore, or the lies that had torn through their lives. It was about something much deeper. Justice had been served. But for Gina, for JK, and for the family they'd hoped to have, was it enough? It's over. But justice doesn't always bring closure. Sometimes there are more questions than answers. Gina lay in a hospital bed, the soft beep of the heart monitor, the only sound breaking the silence. JK was by her side, his hand tightly clasping hers. Their hearts, broken by betrayal, now beat in unison. The pain of the miscarriage was unbearable, but the pain of what they had lost together, everything they thought their future would be, was even harder to bear. But in the midst of their grief, there was something else. There was strength. A strength they hadn't realized they had until they had to face the world without the person who was supposed to love them. There was love. And together, they would face whatever came next. Weeks passed, and the wounds, both physical and emotional, began to heal. But something inside them shifted. They knew they couldn't just move on. They had to make sure no one else had to go through what they had. They needed to make a difference. And so, Gina and JK founded the Foster Foundation for Family Justice. Their mission was simple: to help families fight corruption and abuse, to give a voice to the voiceless, and to protect those who needed it most. They had learned something in the most painful way, that some battles take more than just strength. They take love. They take justice. And they take courage to stand up for what's right, even when the world seems determined to tear you apart. If this story hit you like it did us, hit that like button. It helps us reach more people. And subscribe if you want more gripping stories every week. What do you think really happened that night? Was justice served? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the bell to stay updated on our latest videos.